Let's start again. Hello, everybody. Welcome to this meeting of the Environment and Sustainable Communities Committee, which is a subcommittee of the Cambridge and Peterborough Combined Authority. Welcome to all the board members, the committee members, and thank you to all our officer colleagues who are supporting us today and who've done all the work to get us to this point. I don't think we've got any members of public or press in the room, but they might be online and you are equally welcome. We've got no fire drills scheduled today, so if it goes off, then we will act appropriately. So, announcements and apologies. Could the governance manager let us know of any apologies, please?
Thank you, Chair. We have apologies today from the business board representatives, Tim Jones and Emma Garfield.
That's lovely. Thank you very much. Does any member wish to declare disclosable pecuniary interest or non-statutory disclosable interest on any item we're considering today, please? No. If anything occurs to you during the meeting, then just let us know and we will log that. Minutes of the meeting. So item 3 is the minutes and the action log. Are there any? Lara, Councillor Davenport-Ray.
Thank you, Chair. In the minutes from the Director's Highlight Report, it says that the Strategic Planning Manager will give us an update on the Waterbeach Renewable Energy Project at this meeting. I see it's not on the agenda. Could we add that as an action for October?
Thank you, Judith. Yeah, okay, thank you. Thank you very much. I'm sure there's a very good reason why it's not.
And then on the action plan from June, number 4, National Highways to be invited. That was specifically about the A14. Yeah, just for future, so we don't mix it up with A42A.
Yes. Have we had any joy with communicating with them?
Yes, so we on the A14 issue, we had a response on the tree planting, and that was circulated around the committee. Yeah. And on the A428, they have said they would be able to come to our next committee and present on what they're doing, lessons learned from the A14 on the A428 improvement.
That's lovely, thank you. So actually, I think the response they sent us on the A14 was very good, and thank you to those members of this committee who were very much very involved in getting us to that point. It would be really interesting to hear about lessons learned, because there's nothing more frustrating for us or residents when they see the same mistakes made again, and particularly when the weather's so hot. Let's hope. I think no tree planting was going to happen until the autumn, was it? But it might be a very dry autumn. Okie doke. Thank you very much indeed. So there's the comment is noted. I don't see any objections, so we'll take the minutes as approved and the action log as noted. Are we all agreed on that? Thank you very much indeed. So we've received 3 questions for the meeting today, all of which have been published on the website and circulated to members. So I'll ask Joe to read them, because none of the questioners have been able to attend today, but I will respond to them all. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. So the first question is from Chris Poynton, Cambridgeshire Climate Leaders. We welcome what we hope is the unblocking of funds for climate action by rural communities. However, we are concerned that without coordination, there will be duplication of effort, missed opportunities for innovative ideas, and a failure to achieve the scale of impact we all want to see from this funding. Will the CPCA and the districts commit to collaborating to identify and connect similar projects across districts? The Climate Leaders Network of over 80 people taking action on climate and nature in communities around the region is ready to help.
So thank you very much indeed, Chris, and thank you for the offer to help. And we will. It would be quite. I think myself and the Vice Chair would probably quite like to meet with you to have a chat about that, actually, to see what sort of help would benefit us all. So we debated this for ages at this committee about funds should remain with the combined authority, or whether it should be devolved down to the districts, who of course are actually very, very well connected to all the communities, know their communities well, know what the opportunities are, and are more than likely already working in this area. So after, much debate on it, we decided that the best way to get this money out of the door, and it's been stuck behind the door for far too long, was to disseminate it down to the district. We have within the combined authority, our chief executives and our officers meet regularly. So there is coordination between the districts to make sure that there's not duplication. And from my point of view, it's the opportunity for schemes that cross the borders. So, these borders are not walls. I lead on the environment for the Pan-Regional Partnership as well, Oxford-Cambridge Pan-Regional Partnership. And that's very much about promoting schemes that are environmentally beneficial across that much wider geography. So things at scale over much wider geographies. So, I will be able to input that, and the mayor sits on the board as well for the Pan-Regional Partnership. So it could be that work comes out of that, which we can tap into as well. So what I don't really want to see happening is the money being divvied up on lots of little diddy projects that don't really deliver the environmental benefits. So, we will be keeping a close eye on this to make sure that there is proper collaboration. But, if it locally led is my view, locally led is always better. It's always better than top down. And, the more removed an organisation is from its communities, the slower the process seems to be. So, give money to communities and they will spend it, and they will spend it at speed. I think all this committee are going to be keeping a very, very close eye on that. And I hope we have some schemes that are highly innovative, but very mindful about filling gaps that are currently there within our geography. Is there anything else, Judith, that I should add to that? Okay. Thank you very much indeed. But we will arrange to meet up with you, Chris, probably after the summer holidays, and have a proper chat with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Question 2 is from Alana Sinclair from the Cambridge Carbon Footprint. As the committee knows, Cambridge Carbon Footprint and its community partners around the region are eagerly awaiting the chance to bid for funds under the new Opportunity Fund. We have several community-focused projects that could easily be deployed within this financial year. However, the time is ticking, and we're concerned that final timescales will be driven by capacity to manage the process, as echoes of the Net Zero Villages programme. Will the committee ensure that the Opportunity Fund is adequately resourced to enable it to finalise the programme criteria, run the bidding, and make allocations at pace that the climate emergency and our net zero targets demand?
Thank you, Alana. Really, really good question. So it has been frustrating for all of us how long it takes to get some of this money out of the door. The combined authority is not a massive organisation. We haven't got that many staff, and they are very, very stretched. So they have been working extremely hard and doing their very, very best to make these processes as fast and efficient as possible. I think we're in a much, much better place now than we were even 12 months ago. So I have far more confidence that this fund will be efficient. I absolutely take your point about the pressures that a sort of arbitrary, hard cut-off time limit puts on people. It means that people won't put forward projects that might be tremendously valuable if they think they themselves can't resource it to get it out in that time. So we are hopefully going to be able to agree that projects may well have to run into 25, 26. What my notes here say here is delivering the outputs and outcomes is more important than the financial year in which they occur. So I hope that gives you, reassurance that we are going to be pragmatic, but we do want to deliver at pace. We can't afford. We're in a climate crisis. We can't afford to take too much time about this. So we would like to see people delivering at pace, but we will not be discouraging people because they're going to go over into 25, 26. Is that all? Anything else? No? Okay. Thank you very much indeed. So.
Okay. And the final question is from James Rickson, Melinda Rigby, and Matthew Tully from Cambridge Retrofit Hub Team. Having waited for over 2 years for vital funding to be released for climate action in our villages, we are pleased to see a new plan for deployment of the Net Zero Villages funding by the districts. We do, however, have concerns about increased overheads with this approach, and also would like to be reassured about the district's capacity to deliver the programme, especially those whose climate programmes are not far advanced. What assurances have the districts provided to CPCA that they are ready and able to deploy the funds fairly, effectively, and without excessive administrational overheads within the very short remaining timeframe this financial year?
Thank you very much, James and Melinda and Matthew. So again, another very good question. One of the reasons that we've decided to devolve this funding down to the districts is actually we believe that actually the overheads will be reduced, because all of the district councils have processes and teams in place who are used to managing grant funding and getting money out to community groups. So actually, we're really experienced at it. Our Section 151 officers are, very, very accomplished in making sure that, all the due diligence has gone through, that everything's done properly. So it's because the districts, I am pretty sure, are going to be better able to do it than the combined authority, which isn't resourced to do this at the moment and would have to resource itself up to do it, whereas the districts already are resourced, and that's why we've decided to devolve it down to the districts, because they already have the systems and the people in place. And I think it means that this money will get out much quicker, will be much better informed by local issues and local groups and local priorities, that the combined authority, which sits at a much higher level, will be able to do. So I think it's the efficient and right decision, and I hope everybody agrees with that. Med, do you want to just comment on that? It's no criticism of the combined authority, but the combined authority functions at a much higher kind of strategic level. Mayor,
is it okay? Are you?
No, please do, because you are the mayor.
Clarification and sort of observation of much of what I absolutely agree with you, and the decision to get money out, to get on with it, work as ever in collaboration with constituent authorities. We are a combined authority. It works both ways. We should be willing to sort of devolve powers down in the same way that comes the other way. But I just wanted to clarify, we've obviously gone through a whole host at combined authority level around governance and frameworks about decision making, and I'm keen to understand, well, with this fund as much as any fund, is how is the kind of agreed strategic frameworks that we put in case in best value, what we've looked at, how will that be not imposed, but how will we work in conjunction?
How will we oversee it?
Yeah, and if things aren't quite as we would see them, when do we get the feedback? When do we get the audit? When the transparency over it all.
Judith, would you like to come in on that, please?
Thank you. I think that's a really important point, and it goes across some of the other discussions we'll be having about the climate programme more widely as well. And I think there's two answers, essentially. Firstly, that any of the funding that's delivered to any of our partners who are receiving money will have a grant funding agreement, and it will have a schedule attached to that that sets out how much money and effectively what we're buying with that money. And then officers at CPCA will be responsible for collecting that monitoring information that kind of gives us that process. Now, because we're looking at probably allowing spend of some of this money into 25-26, it's likely the funding agreements will roll for 24-25 and 25-26, and we'll need to be ensuring that that process is appropriate and proportionate, because obviously the amounts of money we're talking about aren't huge, but equally we want impact of that money, and I'm sure our local authorities very much take that approach as well. Then secondly, within each local authority, they have a Section 151 officer or a Section 73 officer, and it is indeed their responsibility to ensure that any public money in that local authority passes those same value for money tests that we're using in our single assurance framework. So when that money is delegated, they too have to have those checks and balances in place, and they have to generally sign off, or the deputy signs off the claim forms. So they have to show that they're content with the processes at their end as well. So there's a whole set of checks and balances to reassure us that that's happening.
Thank you. And I think one of the things we need to discuss is about how this all reports back to this committee, actually. And certainly, you know, as schemes deliver, it'd be really nice if people would come and present to us, and as Huntingdon District Council did about their scheme, because, you know, we like to hear the good news stuff. So it'd be, yeah, please do.
I think a very important point, because this sets strategic direction and absolute, or if they're not, let's look at why and change them, or also what we're to allow for that. So obviously, typically at this committee, you receive a performance and budget report. We're not doing that today because that came in the June meeting, but we do it generally. And I think when we spoke last time, we did say that there would be improvements to that report. Jules Yent, who is the policy and insight manager, is leading a really strong piece of work to review and improve monitoring and evaluation. Because we need to know as officers the success or not of the funding that we're delivering, so that we can intervene before it gets to committee. But equally, you as committee members need to know that that's happening and be able to comment and hold us to account for it. So that's a really important part of the process. Now, I absolutely recognise we're on a journey. We're not quite there yet with the amount of transparency in account framework, and part of what I looked improve in terms of our accountability to this committee going forward.
Thank you very much indeed. So we're trying to take some of the bureaucracy out of it. We're trying to get the money out the door. We're trying to be far more efficient, and we're trying to be far more responsive to local priorities. But it will be kept under review. So thank you. So moving on, we've already noted the forward plan, haven't we? So we're going to move on to item 6, which is the director's highlight report. So over to Judith again.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Just making sure I'd got the right document there. We're all dealing with a lot of paperwork, aren't we? So we met in June, and obviously this has brought you up to date with a number of areas of both CPCA business and wider that we have been dealing with in the world of environment and sustainable communities. And obviously the committee will be very aware that since we last met, we've had a change of government, and a considerable programme of activity was set out in the King's Speech on the 17th of July. And obviously, even this week, we've had further announcements clarifying the position in terms of processes of reform and change in planning and infrastructure. But what I particularly noted and wanted to draw your attention to is in the field of energy, because obviously there's been a strong theme at this committee about the importance of renewables, about clean energy, and commitments from many of our local authorities to working with renewables in order to generate power differently and with much lower carbon impact. And obviously what we can see is to local authorities, and indeed low cost loans for community energy. Now that clearly provides us with an opportunity for funding key bits of infrastructure in this area. And I think it's a real opportunity for us to think about how we access those opportunities, both as constituent authorities and as CPCA. So I wanted to draw that to the committee's attention to say that's something we'll be looking at going forward. And in particular, that will fit with the request that we've had from government for all mayoral combined authorities to produce local growth plans. So these local growth plans, we're still very much working, and I think government is still working on exactly what will be in scope and how they will work together. But it is absolutely the case that mayoral combined authorities will be working to produce local growth plans for an early brief version of that to be submitted by the end of August, very much using existing evidence base and work that we've done and that has been agreed and overseen by our constituent authorities. for then further work to be done in the autumn, looking towards a 10-year plan. Now, the intention is that those local growth plans will become statutory, but obviously they're not at present, but we'll be working very hard to consider how we work with our constituent authorities on producing those. And there is a meeting every Thursday set up with our constituent authorities during August and beyond to make sure that we work together on that agenda. So I also just wanted to mention tomorrow we have we are hosting I can't quite remember the name of the National Infrastructure Committee. I'm trying to think. It's not a workshop, is it? It's a very significant session that we've been asked to host to look at energy generation and distribution, and it's being hosted by the Mayor with Sir John Armitt, who is the chair of the National Infrastructure Committee. So it gives us an opportunity to explain the issues that we have here and some of the proposed solutions that we also have looked at. And we have representatives from across the area, both the private and the public sector, to feed into that session. The local nature recovery strategy is a piece of work that we've been hoping to bring in draft to this meeting in September in order to kick off the 8-week consultation period. Adrian can provide more details, but it is looking more likely that we will be bringing that to the October committee because the steering group feels some more work needs to be done. I did also just want to touch on, before I hand back to you, Chair, the particular work that was happening across the area led by county on the locally determined contributions, because I remember, Chair, that we said that we would have a briefing in detail on locally determined contributions. And make sure that we're not only up to date on understanding what they are all about, but also the progress that's happening and how it fits into the wider work. So we can look at bringing that in the autumn. We continue to do work on water with our colleagues at both Fen and Soil and Natural Cambridgeshire. And we note that the Secretary of State granted the permission for the Sonica solar farm very early in the new government. So there's a range of things happening. I think one of the things, if I could just finish by saying this, there's clearly a number of things that are happening at very local level. There's also a number of things that are happening at sort of strategic at regional and national level. And I think one of the things we need to reflect on is how we bring these together so that we have oversight of both the national and regional and also the local things consistently to this committee, so that you have proper and appropriate oversight and opportunity to input. And sometimes we might feel that that's best done through a workshop setting, because that'll allow you to go into more detail, but also, of course, very happy to bring the reports more formally to you. But perhaps that's something we can discuss into the autumn as well, about what's the most helpful way to bring information to this committee. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. Right, we'll start with questions before I speak. Yes, Councillor Goodall. Yep.
Thank you, Chair. I've got 3 quick questions, really. 2.3, do we know what opportunities we're going to be looking for in the Great British Energy? And on 2.1, the local nature recovery strategy, the LRS process has been at a tortuous, slow pace. And if what we happen so far, I feel that we will miss the targets the paper sets out. And how can we speed up this laborious process? Because already you're saying the 8 weeks consultation is now being pushed back again. That will take us into the spring then before we can start. And that's a new financial year. So, you know, and this has been ongoing for a long time. And with the Sonica solar farm, we at East Cambs are very disappointed in this decision to go ahead. And we are exploring with fellow districts and other areas that are affected by it, because it affects not just East Cambs, but over in Suffolk and as well. And looking at the legal options and how to proceed in getting this either reviewed or reversed if possible.
If I just chip in, Judith, before coming to you. So my understanding is that as far as the local nature recovery strategy is concerned, actually we're being we're doing it far quicker than most other places. So I think we've been ahead of a lot of other places, I think, haven't we, Adrian?
Yes, in terms of looking nationally, Natural England set the target or aspiration for full coverage of LRSs from next March. Informally, we think that there's probably about 2/3 of authorities that won't meet that. And we're in the third that is still aiming to meet that. I think some of the comments about the processes are correct in that it has been an element of drip feed of guidance, so that has caused some challenges in the process. So the steering group did meet. They did consider the concerns that had been raised, particularly from local authority ecologist group, and they've agreed a process of setting up a small subgroup to do a bit of intense work to ensure we meet that deadline. I think there are still risks. This is a new process we've not done before, but we are very much trying to hold the line that we would be in a position to approve it in March, because that would then accelerate what we're aiming to do with it. But I think there are risks in terms of the scale of the project that we've got in front of us.
So what I've asked is that because I gather there's some technical work which isn't going to get completed by September, and we have to have the technical stuff to back it up, that the committee has a workshop on that September date where we really, all of us, thrash out all the tricky stuff. So when it comes back to us in October for sign off, actually we've dealt with all the issues. Because what I don't want to do is get to October and find that some members of the committee have big issues, which actually means that we can't vote on it. So if we have a workshop and we just kind of thrash out everything on it. But I'm actually very pleased with how we've managed it, and the fact that we're ahead of the game of 2/3 of other authorities. Can I ask Judith or Adrian to talk about the first point, which was on the British Energy? Yes, but I think the answer might be we don't know as yet.
Yes, it's a good question, something we need to look at speed. And I think there's two key things that I'd sort of look at in that context. One, we are, as you know, because there's a paper to update you on this committee, have been working on the infrastructure delivery framework. That is a very important piece of work, because that's obviously setting out the infrastructure gaps. That gives us another key piece of evidence, which will then inform the second key thing, which is the local growth plans. So our aspirations for energy and what we're going to work on will need to be part of that local growth plan. And then one of the things that we've been asked within the local growth plan is to look innovatively at how we bring in funding into this area, and indeed any mayoral combined authority does. So that might include private sector money, it might include public sector money, it might include kind of joint ventures. And so what I would see is that we would use the thinking on that local growth plan, which will be with our constituent authorities, to think about, then what are the key things we want to invest in? And if one of those is about energy, then that is the thing that we would have the conversation with Great British Energy about. But I can't give further details at the moment because it needs to form part of that process.
Is that all right? Okay. Okay, so I'm aware that there are as many renewable energy schemes are on hold because there is not capacity in the grid to take the electricity as have actually been delivered. So, we could have been generating twice as much renewable energy as we are, because there's not been the investment in the capacity of the grid. Councillor Lara Davenport-Ray.
I have two questions. On the local nature recovery strategy, could you give us an idea of, given the timings in your report, when we go back to our local authorities, what's the window of time when we need to make sure we have a committee meeting scheduled to make sure that process goes smoothly and we have collected the thoughts of our local authority before the consultation ends?
Because it'd be nice to have that for the September workshop, shouldn't it? So we're coming informed with the views of our councils. Yeah.
And our councils might want to submit their own response to the consultation as well. But then on the National Infrastructure Commission meeting you have tomorrow, and a bit on GB Energy as well, I'm worried that there's some duplication here with local area energy planning. I would hope that the local area energy plan that Peterborough already has, that we're developing, would set out what are those things that we want to seek funding for and already identify where are the shortfalls. So I'm hoping we're not duplicating any work with the NIC.
That's a really good point. Judith?
I'll come back on that one and then I'll ask Adrian to speak to the question about the local nature recovery strategy. Yes, so the NIC event is to feed into a piece of work that the NIC are leading on nationally to identify national issues about both electricity generation and distribution. So it should absolutely pick up some of the issues that we were just highlighting there, that there's capacity, but we can't do anything with it because it can't get into the grid. So we have been very keen in our sort of positioning of this event with the National Infrastructure Commission, that we wanted to look at the whole of the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough area, that we wanted to make sure there were representatives who could speak to the local area energy plans and how they fit. So I'm pleased to say that Charlotte Palmer from Peterborough City Council is coming to the event tomorrow, and she will be able to speak about the Peterborough local area energy plan. So we're trying to build up those connections so that those voices are heard. Now, in any kind of 1 hour session, you're not going to hear all of them, but hopefully we've kind of set up the members at the table who can all speak, both from a private sector point of view, a public sector point of view, and particularly draw out those issues. So I'm hoping we'll address it and that Charlotte will be empowered to speak tomorrow.
Thank you. Any other questions? Oh, Adrian, yes, please come in. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, on the local nature recovery strategy, all councils are supporting authorities, and there is a formal 28-day period where we have to consult each council as to whether the document is suitable to go out for public consultation. So that's different to consulting on content in terms of responses you might like to make. So we will circulate what that means in terms of the timing to authorities. I think what we can't do is extend the programme beyond the 28 days without it meaning we're going to miss the march. So in that sense, we're hoping that suitable arrangements could be made within authorities to make a decision.
Yeah. Yes, Judith?
Just to add to that, to inform our workshop that we're talking about having on September on that, I think it would be very helpful if between this meeting and then that we have that kind of clear programme update, so that Huntingdonshire and other local authorities can just schedule in and track and test if they can fit in those key points, or if it's going to give them any challenges. So if we could circulate that committee in advance of the September session, then everyone can sort of do that bit of planning, please.
Thank you. Yeah, and I certainly like confirmation that every single member council has arranged an opportunity to discuss it. I don't want any surprises to find that somebody hasn't been able to do so. Did you want to come back, Lara? No. Okay. Yes, Nicola.
Sort of repeating what other people have asked, really, but it's on the Great British Energy. And as Lara said, we have a local area energy plan. And obviously Peterborough has got sort of distinct net zero ambitions and has also been working on a housing strategy. So the question really is sort of echoing a question earlier about we need to know that wider scope. And this came up in our group leaders meeting, as well as a meeting that I had with Charlotte Palmer earlier, because we've got some of that information which will be already available. But yeah, I'm just wondering what the deadline for that, because by the end of August seems a really quick timescale to put something really fruitful and productive in place by then. And would there be, if that's the deadline, what about after that? It does say that it doesn't really say that there'll be any sort of consultation or comeback after that. I appreciate it's obviously a very new thing, but it just seems a really short time frame, and I'm a bit worried about that. Thanks.
Thank you, Judith.
Yes. I wouldn't disagree with the fact it's a very short timeline. I'm sure if we worked out how many working days there is between now and then, it's not very long at all. So my understanding of the process is that we're requested by government to make a brief submission by the end of August, and that will be a kind of 6-pager, is my understanding, and that will be using much of the work that we've already, worked on and that you will be familiar with, because we're very aware that what we can't be doing in a 6-page at the end of August is introducing new concepts that hasn't got wider support. So it will be based around the evidence and the kind of things that you've seen before and documents that you're already aware of. So we have each Thursday from tomorrow. We're working with nominated senior officers from each local authority, and they will be meeting each Wednesday. And Adrian Chapman is the Peterborough person who will be joining that call, and that is to oversee the production of that 6-pager and indeed to feed them back to chief executives. So my understanding is that there will be an update at the leader strategy meeting on the 14th of August, that there will also be an update to the public service board, so the chief execs board, who obviously meet with fire and police, etc., at the end of August as well. It is made more difficult by leave and so on, but we're trying to put in place the kind of back substitutes to make sure all of those things are covered. So that will go in at the end of that. Rob and other colleagues at the authority are working very closely, I'm sure as the mayor is as well, with the other mayoral combined authorities to understand what they're doing and how they're handling it. So we're not reinventing the wheel 13 times. So that's very much sort of thinking about that. But then your other point, which is really about what happens after that, is absolutely our understanding is, and I'm not aware of the timetable for this, I don't think there is one at the moment, is that we are then producing a fuller focused 10-year remit, which will then which my understanding was that would then feed into the comprehensive spending review. Now, obviously on Monday, we heard that the budget will be on the 13th of October and that the spending review will be in 2 parts. There'll be a 1-year, and then there'll be one for the 2 years of 26, 27, 27, 28. So how our document's going to fit in and what exactly the timings are, perhaps that will become clear at the end of this week. But there will be a process, and we will clearly need to be updating the board and those kind of committees as we go forward with how it's looking. There's a focus as well on us not only working with our constituent authorities, but thinking how we're engaging more widely. And we're going to need to think about that balance of engagement against timing. And that is going to be a challenge, but clearly one we're up for.
Thank you very much. So the relationship between local growth plans and spatial plans, are they kind of merging into one and the same thing eventually?
I don't believe we have that clarity, but my understanding is that the local growth plan is a separate document to the spatial plan, but clearly they will have a relationship, as they will have a relationship with other plans that we've got, such as the local transport connectivity plan and other parts of the kind of strategic framework. But I think clearly government's working on clarity. It may be that the mayor has an insight from political meetings that he can add to that.
Thank you, Mayor.
To be fair, Judith has pretty much covered it all, but I think for elected mayors, and just to reflect on a very busy 3 weeks, 3 weeks of the like I have never known in my role as a mayor, and things changed, from the potential thrill of walking down Downing Street for the first time, but very demonstratively, the incoming government saying, we've got challenges here, which I think we all recognise around the table, but at the same time looking at things differently around frameworks of local government. And I think it's one thing that hasn't been highlighted enough. And I'll certainly blow the trumpet here for Angie Rayner and the team. There is a real recognition that local government over decades has been unfairly sort of left to its own devices and underfunded across all areas. And I think a recognition that, to move away from the politics of this, that people like Andy Street, who was in West Midlands, he was given a huge amount of recognition and success, which was driven in West Midlands, alongside Andy Burnham, and given this trailblazer status. So I think the reason I wanted to speak, and not really because I can add any more, I think there is something that's I'm still trying to understand around spatial planning, but I think it's almost it's a challenge to us all. It's a challenge to myself as the mayor to get the balance right, but it's also a challenge as my CEO or our CEO, who is Rob, but remind you all is that when you come here, you know, you may be sort of under a badge, and as we all have, East Cambridgeshire County Council, Cambridge City, you're actually here for the combined authority. So we have to look at how we take the opportunities of a new government, a new way of thinking, a new way of delivering devolution, more powers and more money. And I'm signed up to it. Well, why wouldn't I be? Because it's the first time I felt really engaged with central government for a long time, but also because I genuinely believe, you know, successes that was shown in Andy Street in West Midlands, in the same way Andy Burnham in Greater Manchester, in actually driving the economy, whereas over the last few years, for many reasons, the UK economy has stalled. We have a real opportunity, and so it's almost like a challenge, you know, for us to get this right. And it is too fast. But then again, that's all new governments coming. I assume that they all want to look like they're being purposeful. I don't think we're alone. No. I think it's central government. They're also not having their holidays. So
yeah, okay.
It's just that's an observation. Sorry, nothing more specific.
Thank you. And I mean, I think we'll have challenges because certainly within our partners, we have local plans at different points in time, don't we? So I think that's going to add to some of the complexities. Okay. Yes, Councillor Day.
Question, just for clarification, it talks about the local power plan and the offer of a 600 million grant to local authorities. So just to double check, because obviously we're here as a combined authority, that's going to go directly to local authorities without coming through the combined authority. And would that be the same for the local? I know that we might not know, and I do really support the idea of devolution and more money for local authorities as well. But yeah, will that come again? Will the local growth plans and that money that will come from that, will that come through the local authorities as well? Just to clarify that point, if that's okay.
To be honest, at this point, I don't know the routes on either Great British Energy or exactly how the funding will work for the local growth plan. I think we need to wait and see how that develops.
There's a lot of don't knows at the moment, haven't we?
Yeah, well, that is true. But if you ask the likelihood, I think it'll come to the combined authority.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, certainly there's a lot of
it's just if I pick up from all the conversations, the push to more devolution and where devolution is going to happen around the rest of the country, it's the favoured model, and it's well, hopefully, you know, we have the advantage that we already have a combined authority for Cambridge and Peterborough, so we're at the front of it. I have one more question as well.
Yeah, can I just go to Councillor Dupre first and then come back to you, please? Thank you.
Yeah, just to add that I think one of the don't knows really for us all is given all the signs coming from government and the actions coming from government about approving very rapidly, very ultra large commercial schemes, what the place of community energy is in the new general energy framework in which we find ourselves.
Absolutely. Yes. Back to you, Mayor.
It's another question and a small point, but not to let it be forgotten about. In 2.7, there is highlighted Cambridge Cultural Project, the business case, which it is explained that it's going to the investment panel on the 29th of August. And I know I'll be sitting on that myself. There's no secret. I think we've a long time coming in trying to get a sort of narrative about making the most of our cultural assets to help grow our economy, but also get them more recognised. I just was looking if you could just fill that out over a few lines, Judith, to ensure that, you know, not only is that going to the investment panel, but there's still a real sense of drive from within your area, and we have the right resources and all these things.
Adrian, to talk to that. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. So, yes, it's going to the investment panel, which is the officer group, because of the scale of funding. So it's below the. So I'm afraid, Mayor, you won't be there, but I will channel your support for the project, which I know you've been behind. Just to say that there is also work being led by Jules Iant, that we've mentioned before, around cultural issues in general, and there is a separate budget line for that as well within the MTFP. So that will come back through the relevant routes in due course, but this is a specific individual project.
Thank you. And I know there's members of my council will be very pleased to hear that progress has been made on a cultural offer, actually. Okay, if there's no other questions, we're asked to note this paper, which I think we've done, so we don't need to vote. So we'll move on now to the Affordable Housing Programme and the update on implementation, and that's over to Asma, as always. Morning.
Good morning, everyone. I'll just give you a quick update on the Affordable Housing Programme as it stands at the moment. We have 538 units to be completed. That's mainly the Northminster and Westbeach sites. 898 are completed. Just an overview, Halo have had a partnership with Keepmoat and Allison Homes, and they have finalised one of their projects. They have provided 45 homes. All the Allison Homes sites that were in that have been completed. There is one outstanding. The last project is due to complete at the end of this month. Good. So that would be good news. Wisbech Road March has fallen behind schedule, unfortunately. There was supposed to be a launch, as I've mentioned in the previous paper, for this month. We've had to reschedule the launch, and we've been advised that it's going to take a little bit longer. They've had issues really with a lot of weather. When I went and visited them in December, a lot of rain has since happened and it's just fallen behind schedule. Also, I note in the paper that Sage Homes had a deed of novation. They were looking to move their programme into a shared ownership housing department. That has due to have completed last March, but it has now completed this March 2024. That's just an update. Cross Keys Homes, Harkins Phase 2 has been handed over. That's 96 units to the combined authority. British Sugarway has been partially in possession. There's a lot of snagging on site, so there are about 50 units completed. The rest are being dealt with by CKH as they've had some contractual issues. Northminster is going well. That looks like to be on target, and Great Haddon is due to complete mid-2025. There's just issues with roads, I believe. Can't get to the units unless the road is constructed. Stand Ground is still in progress, and the GFA is being novated as we speak. Looks like the garage sites that we were hoping to get from CKH are no longer going to happen. So I've asked them for an alternative. And finally, 24 High Street, Fenland District Council's one of their units, they've just updated me saying that they're hoping to complete later this year. They just had to do some structural works because it's in between two buildings, and they had to reinforce the walls either side of the units. And that completes the implementation of the Affordable Housing Programme.
Thank you. Thank you, Asma. Goodness, some of this is snail's pace, isn't it? But it sounds like we're getting there on all of them. So well done. Any questions on this? Councillor Goodall.
Thank you, Chair. In 3.1, you said part 1 and 2 was completed before 31st of March. And what we are doing is to build 560. What are we doing to do the 564 shortfall from the 2,000 that were planned? On 3.1, you said part 1 and part 2 completed before 31st of March 2022. What are we doing to build the 564 shortfall of the 2,000 that was planned? Because you've only got
No.
719 of the 2,000 units that was proposed.
So I think that 2,000 was an aspiration, wasn't it? And the reality is that we can't and won't be building out to that 2,000. Is that correct?
That is correct. The target was 2,000, but due to issues and COVID and everything, we only managed to reach 1,450 to target. So we were not able to reach that 2,000 target.
And inflation. Mayor, you want to intervene there?
Well, I've also had the fact that we also didn't get £45 million.
Thank you for yes.
Yeah, I think it was a more substantial factor in that we weren't able to realise the £2,000. That was a decision
a long time ago.
A decision made despite requests by an incoming mayor with regard to concerns as to how the housing programme, with no respect just to yourself, Asma, but how it was being run previously within the combined authority.
Thank you. Judith, you want to come in?
So just for clarity, the current programme that we're delivering is the 1,400 or so homes, and that is the funding that we've got, and that is what Asma's work is focused on.
Is that clear? Okay. Any other questions from anybody? Yes, Councillor Davenport-Ray.
Asma, on British Sugar Way, it has a long stop date of the 30th of September. What happens after that date if it's not complete?
I have been advised that it will meet that target date, 30th of September. There are only a few problems with some of the snagging within the unit. And when they got partial possession at the end of May, CKH have brought their own subtractors in, and they're dealing with that at the moment. So I have been advised it will be the 30th of September.
It will be. All right, we're holding you to that.
I've been updated quite regularly on that.
Okay. Any other questions? No? Okay. Well, thank you very much indeed. So we're asked to note this report as well. And thank you, Asma. I think we're sticking with you, aren't we? For next item. Yes. Okay. Which is the acquiring additional units for the affordable housing programme. So over to you again. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. This is just to require, to understand that this is just no vote is required at the beginning part of this. This is just an update. And then the final one is just a recommendation of these units. As we start, we managed to gain some accumulations of grant funds during the programme, and this was known as clawback. So basically, if any units were bought over and above the shares that we had presented in grant, that came back to us in accumulation of clawback. This was throughout the affordable housing programme for mainly shared ownership properties, not the rented. We worked with Halo and various other organisations who had shared ownership properties, and we managed to claim clawback throughout the programme. We approached Halo, who were able to get properties off the shelf a lot more easily than our other partners, and they said that they would try and acquire further units for us. In the first instance, just to recollect, we had issues with Halo throughout the programme with swapping of units. So this one was the one referring to the units that started off at SN Developments in the East Cambs area, and then the Vistry sites. Just to let you know, Halo were just about to sign with the Vistry sites and found out, due to the Chancellor and sort of issues with stamp duty in the March budget, they were no longer able to proceed with Vistry, and therefore they stopped. They went to another programme provider of theirs, which was Allison Homes, and those units were replaced by them. 5 units at Abbey Park and 7 at Harriers West. Unfortunately, all of them in PCC. Yeah. So that has been agreed, and I believe the GFA has been signed recently for that. And that now matter is closed. In regards to the second part of this paper, which looks at accumulation, this is where we had managed to accumulate over £200,000 in a grant clawback money. As looking to the natural end of the programme and trying to use those extra funds, otherwise give it back, we decided to see if we could ask Halo to purchase further additional units easily. They managed to provide 8 units, again, with their main provider of Allison Homes, taking into account all the clawback issues and stamp duty issues that they would have to infer with. And they managed to provide 8 units in the Peterborough area, 4 of those at Fletton Folly, 2 at Abbey Park, and 2 at Harriers Rest. That's 8 units altogether. The average grant rate in total was 279,000, which I think is stated in the paper, 160. And the average rate per home is about 34,000, just over. Peterborough was supportive of those 8 units. And as it stands at the moment, we're looking to sign a GFA on approval today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. If I just remind members, there's an exempt appendices here. If you want to discuss what's in the exempt appendices, then we'll have to go into closed session to do that. Thank you, Asma. Lara.
I have two related questions. Can you hear me? Is that all right, Chris? So the sites that were originally in Haddenham, we've now found alternatives in Peterborough. That's quite a big difference in geography. I'm curious, when that happens, how much searching or research is done to try to find sites closer to the original geography? That's my first question. And then the second one is somewhat related. So the clawback sites are in Peterborough as well. Thank you for providing the map that shows the distribution of all the sites. There's a clear concentration in Peterborough, and I'm wondering if you can explain some of the reasons why that might be. With populations spread all over, are the builders being more efficient there? There's some reason why a lot of them are ending up in that geographic area.
Thank you. Asma.
With regards to the first question, a lot of research was tried to ensure that we got the units back in the area that originally approached. So we did have some of the Vistry sites in the East Cambridgeshire area, but we found that obviously due to Vistry and the stamp duty issues, we're finding it was very difficult to actually maintain the units in East Cambs. So it was unfortunate. The other providers were only able to provide units in Peterborough, which is where their main area of concentration is at the moment. In regards to the second part of the question, I did try and ensure that the properties were covered over a vast area. There is a concentration in Peterborough, I do understand that, but we've had big projects in Peterborough. We have one of our main housing associations that work in Peterborough, which is Cross Keys Homes, which had lots of sites in and around Peterborough. They did have a couple in Huntington as well. But it's just unfortunate the big projects are actually in the Peterborough area, such as Northminster, which makes it look like there's a lot of units there. It's just unfortunate, but we have tried to maintain a good spread as much as can. But sometimes you do find concentration is in one area because of those areas were cheap as well in acquiring units and spending money earlier on in the programme. Later on, we found that it was getting harder and harder to sort of target areas such as South Cambs and East Cambs.
Thank you. I mean, going back, and this is just for information, the original housing strategy from six years ago, probably longer than 6 years ago, was that the distribution of the £100 million would be based on need, with need being affordability. So actually, most of it should have gone to the areas that are more expensive to live in, and that got ditched by previous mayor. But it is a frustration that the place where where housing is the least affordable, therefore arguably the need is greatest for affordable housing, actually hasn't benefited as much as places that are less unaffordable to live in. But I absolutely appreciate the challenges you had, and I think you've done extremely well to get this money spent. Councillor Mike Todd-Jones.
Thank you, Chair. Just referring to 1.2 in reports, and given the history we just have been hearing about, are we reasonably confident these units will be delivered, given that the accumulated clawback there is a risk that it could be returned to the Ministry of Housing, Community and Local Government? But are we fairly confident that we will be able to proceed in the arrangements you described?
Sorry, do you mean with these units with Halo, or just the whole programme in general? Sorry.
Yeah, 1.2 report, and I'm just, there's a reference there to the accumulated clawback might be returned.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, are you confident, given the history behind this, that these will be delivered in our programme?
The need will be delivered. We don't wish to give the money back to MHCLG if we don't have to. So that's why we're pursuing this 8 units.
And this clawback is going to be ongoing. We're going to continue to claw back, are we, for the foreseeable future?
Well, had the programme continued, yes, but no, this is the only bit of clawback that we've got with the current programme as it is.
And so that'll be the end of it. There will be
Yes,
no
that
more
will-
money being
There'll be no
clawed,
further
clawed
money.
back. And the money that we loaned to people, because we loaned, there was a lot of stuff. We had £40 million we loaned out.
Yeah.
Has that now all been, as that's been
That
given back,
is
that's now all been
Used.
reinvested, all
Yes,
used now.
that was to pay off for the part of the programme for the monies that we didn't get from DLUC at the time.
Okay.
So the monies that we got back was to pay for the current grants that are going through at the moment.
That's really helpful. Thank you, Lara. Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. May I come to Councillor Dupre first? Oh, okay. My apologies.
My understanding is strategically that the housing element of the combined authorities work is to wind it up. And so I'm hoping that at a future meeting, whether it's an official meeting or a closed session meeting, whether we could have more information about what is the plan for winding up, what does that timeline look like as far as we know now, because it seems to keep stretching on and on and on.
Yes. Oh, thank you, Judith. Thank you.
Yes, you raise a very good point. And in fact, Asma and I have spoken about the need to focus on a kind of closure plan and bring forward those proposals. So we'll talk about that at our next catch up with a view to which committee that would come to.
Unless the new government wants to give combined authorities more responsibility for housing, which I'm slightly hoping not, because I think we should be doing it at district level. Councillor Dupre. Yeah, you're there.
Thanks. Sorry, the perils of trying to press a button with a broken elbow. I just wanted to ask a bit more about clawback, because I'm sorry if this is blindingly obvious to everybody else and I've just missed it. But this is something that's occurred over the whole life of the programme, that according to 3.2, purchasers have acquired more shares on a shared ownership property than agreed with the house builder or registered provider. I'm curious to know how and why that happens. Is that something that shouldn't have happened and did? Is it something that happens all the time? Is it likely? I mean, we've just been told that there's not going to be any more clawback. Can we guarantee that if there are still houses being built and many of those may be shared ownership and people may find themselves in that position again? I really would welcome some greater clarity about how we've arisen in this how the situation is,
My
and
understanding
how
is
certain we are that it won't happen
Yeah,
again.
my understanding is that people buying shared equity houses can choose, there's a kind of minimum level of equity you buy, but actually, if you have the resources, you can buy more than that. Am I right on that? Asma?
Yeah, that's right. What's happened is we've sort of had a benchmark, but people are entitled to buy more. And at the beginning of the programme, people were able to buy more shares. And that's when the clawback used to hit. It was in the GFA saying that if you bought more shares, that person would have to earn the clawback back. So in most cases, you found that 50 was the market sort of rate for people to buy shared ownership, but some people bought 60, some people bought 70. So when they bought over and above that, that's when the clawback actually hit. There are a few more units coming through that are through shared ownership. It might be a small accumulation of clawback, but I wouldn't have thought it would be as vast as it is at the moment, which is allowing us to buy 8 units.
Want to come back?
Right, so that it would appear that there may be the potential for a small amount of future clawback, and that the agreement then, as I understand it, isn't so much that was how much was agreed and it was breached in some way, but that there was a benchmark set, and that for various reasons people were able and willing to buy more of a share of their shared ownership property than we had expected them to. Is that a fair summary of the position?
That was done between the developer and the house buyer and the client. That had nothing to do with the CPCA. The agreement that we had is that if the developer sold more shares to an individual, then the clawback was hit. So we didn't actually say you can buy as many shares as you like and we'll get the clawback. That was done between the developer and the client. We just got the clawback from the developer because of those shares being sold extra.
So our money was to fund the affordable element of it, which was the rental element of it. And I think the sad fact is that not many people actually, buy more and more shares to the point where they own 100% of the property. I think that was the sort of the vision originally, but that doesn't happen in reality because of all the financial pressures people are under. But
I just wanted to come back and say, you know, you raise a good point that there may be a little bit more clawback that occurs as the programme winds up and indeed into the future, and that will need to be factored into how we handle ongoing monitoring and any closures in the closure programme that we were referring to earlier. So that will need to be factored in. Thank you.
Okay, so if there's no more questions, right, so recommendation A asks us to note the report, which we've done. Oh, hang on, we've got a recommendation. Have we got a recommendation we have to vote on?
Yes.
Oh, hang on. Let me just. Right. So recommendation B, which is on page 23, approve the use of clawback funding of approximately 280,000 for the acquisition of further 8 additional units in Peterborough as part of the affordable housing programme. Can I take that as supported by everybody? Agreed?
Can you propose it?
Oh, I'll propose it. Can I have a seconder, please, Councillor? Actually, if I take Councillor Day, actually, as Peterborough, that'd be suitable. Okay, and yes, we have a vote, please. Okay, unanimous. That's lovely. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, moving on to another complicated issue is the £100,000 homes conditional release of resale price restrictions, and who is going to, Judith, who's Nick's talking to this? Okay, yes. Pretty complex to get your head round. So Nick, over to you, please. You're on.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everybody. My name's Nick Sweeney, Asset Strategy Manager. This report is about the 100k homes that are in Fordham. The 100k Homes Initiative was introduced under the former mayoral administration, and it closed on the 29th of September 2021. 800k homes were provided in Fordham, and responsibility for allocating future purchases was to be managed by the combined authority. But this responsibility was overlooked when the initiative closed. I think it would be useful for me to provide a brief explanation of how the 100k homes model works. New homes were provided to eligible purchasers at an initial purchase price of £100,000. The purchasers entered into an agreement to ensure that when they sell the home, the selling price would not exceed the proportionate value of their initial investment. For example, a new build home sells for £100,000. But the market value of that home is £200,000. So the purchaser signs a deed to ensure that the sale price shall not exceed 50% of the market value when the home is to be sold. 2 years later, say the owner decides to sell, so they are obliged to commission a valuation. Let's say the market value is now £250,000. So the sale price could not exceed 50% or £125,000. So in this example, the value of the purchaser's share in the property will have increased by £25,000. The value of the remaining share will stay locked into the property. The combined authority then has a responsibility to nominate a purchaser who would also have to enter into a resale price agreement, and the arrangement would continue each time a home was to be sold. However, when the 100k homes policy closed in 2021, the combined authority failed to discharge its responsibility to nominate new purchasers. In January 2024, members asked officers to explore 3 options to resolve the issue, and the findings are explained in the annex to the paper. The first option was to enable the homes to function as a more conventional type of affordable housing, such as social rent or shared ownership. The freeholder of the homes is a housing association, so I met with them to discuss this proposal. When considering suitability for social rent, I was informed that the homes were developed for the private market, so they're fitted out to a higher specification than typical flats used for social rent, and this would generate a higher maintenance requirement. Capital would also be required to buy out existing leaseholders. When considering suitability for shared ownership, I was informed that the one-bedroom flats were considered too small for the shared ownership market. As a consequence, the freeholder had no desire to take any further responsibility for the homes. The second option was to transfer the combined authority's responsibility to East Cambridgeshire District Council so the homes can continue operating as 100k homes alongside other 100k homes in East Cambridgeshire. Officers from East Cambridgeshire District Council confirmed they would be willing to accept the combined authority's responsibilities and that there was strong demand for the product. We also considered it appropriate for the local housing authority to allocate purchasers because the homes are a form of affordable housing. The third option was to retain the combined authority's responsibilities and association with the properties. If the combined authority was to retain its responsibilities, then a waiting list of eligible purchasers would need to be established and managed. This would effectively reopen the 100k home scheme, but only for these 8 homes. The former Community Homes team used to manage the process of advertising homes, processing applications, checking the eligibility of applicants, and then nominating purchasers. Sales of these homes are likely to be very sporadic, and there are only 8 homes. So the whole process may need to be refreshed and repeated each time a home becomes available. This will impact upon resources as the former Community Homes posts no longer exist. If the homes were to be used for any other form of affordable housing, the combined authority would require capital to buy each home, and no financial provision has been made for this. The combined authority is not currently a registered housing provider, so it would not be appropriate to acquire the dwellings to be let for social housing. And as it was not considered appropriate for the combined authority to acquire the homes to be sold for shared ownership occupation, for the same reasons expressed by the freeholder. Members asked that the views of the current homeowners should be considered, so I wrote a consultation letter to each of the homeowners, but no responses were received. So the preferred option is to transfer the combined authority's responsibilities and association with these homes to the local housing authority, East Cambridgeshire District Council. The recommendation before members is to recommend to the board that the combined authority releases the resale price restrictions affecting these homes, but this should be conditional on releasing each restriction at the next point of sale. The purchasers shall then immediately enter into replacement resale price agreements with the local housing authority, East Cambridgeshire District Council. And this concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Nick, I'm incredibly grateful for that really clear explanation. Thank you so much. Right, any questions from members? Councillor Davenport-Ray.
I just wanted to say thank you, Nick. I remember coming out of the January meeting, we sent you away with quite a few questions of more information that we wanted, and I feel like I'm much better informed now to make this decision. Especially thank you for attempting to speak to the residents, although none of them took up that offer. It was important to me that we did that. Given what you've had added to the report in terms of data, I think your recommendation is very sound, and I'm happy to go with that recommendation.
I agree. Councillor Dupre, do you want to, as our representative from East Cambs? Well, you're county, aren't you? I'll come to
exactly so.
I'll come to both of you. Yes,
right.
As
Okay.
county rep.
No, I'm not. Although I am an East Cambs district councillor, I'm not
Different hat.
the representative
apologies.
from East Cambs.
My apologies.
I made my views very clear about this whole tottering pile at the January meeting, and I'm not going to tread that old ground again. Given the 3 options in front of us, clearly option 3 is a non-runner, and I don't think anybody would want to run with that. I would be intrigued what would happen if we tried to run option 1 over the heads of the housing association in question. Frankly, that would kind of be my preference. As for option two, well, this was the previous mayor's kind of niche project. It's become and remained East Cambridgeshire District Council's little niche project with these 8 homes. I'm not going to put my name down and support handing this over to East Cambs to do their own thing. My preference would be to explore option one in more detail, but I sense that the easy option, just for the combined authority at least, to draw a line under this is to go for option two. Other members may wish to vote for that. I will not.
Thank you. Councillor Tierney, then Councillor Goodall, please.
It's not clear at all. The light doesn't seem to come on. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I think obviously that the right thing to do is to hand it over to East Cambs. They are clearly enthusiastic about it. They say that there's a popular scheme that has people interested in it, and they're clearly experienced in running such things. So it makes perfect sense to simply hand it over to them, and that's the right thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you for your view. Councillor Goodall.
Thank you, Nick, for a great report. East Cambridge District Council are very happy to take this on, as you know. I'd like to propose this motion, which I did in January, but couldn't get a seconder at the time because more information was required. With the fact that it's 8 houses, but it does add to the portfolio that's already there in East Cambridgeshire, and you have to start with small numbers and build up. And we'd like to build some more 100k houses within East Cambridgeshire for people to live in and get on the housing market. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mayor.
I've just a few questions, Nick. As I understand it, one of these properties has already been sold. Is that correct? So how, and just out of interest, how was that done on that occasion if it wasn't done through any of these proposals?
A sale was agreed. One of the homeowners approached the combined authority last year, I understand, in autumn. Sale terms were agreed, and the combined authority was asked to nominate a purchaser, but the combined authority didn't have a list of eligible purchasers. It doesn't. It closed the initiative. So the former director of Place and Connectivity, the interim director, he signed an officer decision notice authorising East Cambridgeshire District Council to nominate a purchaser for that home. So a purchaser was nominated by East Cambridgeshire District Council for that home. And the last I heard, the sale was stalling, but Rena might be able to update us on to whether or not that's completed. Hasn't completed. So that's still terms are agreed, and its sale is going through.
Okay. Out of interest, again, how much, I always sort of kind of have a wry smile. These aren't 100k homes forever. They obviously, as you described very eloquently, that they do go up in cost. I do wonder what the narrative is. Is there another name for them in the longer term? Because they can't always be 100k homes. So out of interest, what did the 100k homes, the one property that was, do we know what it was on the market for?
Yeah, and it might be commercially sensitive information. So I think
okay, fine.
We just take that away.
Well, I would be obviously.
It will be public information, I expect, when the sale goes through. But I wouldn't like to mention that in public until the sale goes through.
Right. So it's a sale that goes through us. Well, I'm just trying to understand it. We're not.
It's not our conveyance. They've got their own solicitors involved. We're just signing off the relevant documents because we have the stuff on the title of the restrictions.
But these restrictions remain, that whoever takes on these next properties will always recognise that, as you described, whatever it was.
It would be a condition of sale, Mayor, that the new purchaser coming in has to sign an agreement to pledging not to sell in excess of
how watertight is that? That's
well, I think can we take that sort of detail offline and stick to what the recommendation is? Otherwise, I think we're going to get very bogged down on
one other question.
Really.
Yeah, fine. I won't. I'll be interested to hear that. But just to check, there is no other 100k homes apart from the 8 in Fordham?
Currently managed by the combined authority. No, there are only 8.
In totalis, the project or the vision previously was to deliver many of these, but the only combined authority only ever delivered 8 100k homes, and they're not 100k anymore. But that's it.
4 were delivered at Alexander House.
Ah, right. So I know I'm going off.
No, your question is what's happened to those? Is your question? I think, isn't it? Yeah. Okay, because actually, I do think we're probably interested in that.
What has happened to those?
Those homes are managed by East Cambridgeshire District Council in accordance with their 100k homes policy. I think a decision was made as the Alexander House was finishing. A decision was made at some point in time that East Cambridgeshire would take those homes on. I can't comment on how that decision was made. I think.
Okay.
Thank you. I mean, obviously, I think it's just for the record. I share some of your concerns, Councillor Dupre, but to speak to Councillor Tierney, there is a sort of point where you just have to kind of accept what's the best thing. So I'm supportive of this, but I have concerns about what happened to the 4 that we don't know, and I would request that we.
I think that's for outside this meeting. I think what we need to focus on before I come to the 3 people who've indicated is that what we're talking about here is people's homes, and there are people involved in this, and it's their homes, and they are currently living with a certain amount of uncertainty. And I think we just need to focus and make a decision that secures those homes for those people who have put up their own hard-earned cash to buy them and are living in them and need to know, they need to know what their future holds. So I think there's another opportunity outside this meeting to talk about all the kind of governance of this and so on, which is very complicated, and I'm very grateful to Nick for simplifying it as much as he did. But I think we just need to get the decision through that this is people's homes, and we need to make a decision that goes to the board that gives these people certainties over their future. I'm going to come to Councillor Goodall because he's been agitating, I can see, and then I'll come to Councillor Davenport-Ray and then to Councillor Dupre.
Thank you, Chair. All I was going to say, it's not necessarily about the 100k homes per se, is that closing down of programs has got to be done with due diligence. And so this sort of thing doesn't get overlooked again, because if this was closed down with due diligence, that person, when they went and sold their home, would have found another way of doing it, and all this wouldn't have occurred.
I agree. This, it's not a situation that we want to be in, and there's been a failure that has created this situation, but we have an opportunity to put it right now. Lara,
question's been answered.
Okay, Councillor Dupre, then Mike.
That I believe there is still an outstanding piece of work for overview and scrutiny to be doing in respect of housing and some of the issues in housing within the combined authority, and maybe we should alert them to this issue and ask them to include that within the scope of their considerations.
Thank you. Noted. Mike.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to say, I'm recording the previous discussion as well, and my preference, like Councillor Dupre, was to have these homes functioning more as conventional types of affordable housing. Oh, sorry. My preference from previous discussion was for option 1, for these homes to function as more conventional types of affordable housing. But I take your point too, Councillor Smith, about the uncertainty for those residents. So slightly reluctantly, I'm probably minded to support the recommendation as it stands. But, anyway, it's been an interesting conversation. I do agree with the point about the sort of kind of audit and overview issue in terms of this process as well.
Thank you. So I think as an organisation, we're in a very different place now to where we were a couple of years ago when the decision to wind up was. we've had an improvement board in place. Our governance is in a far better place. I think we really embed learning lessons into what we do now. This is not a situation that I could have possibly imagined would happen again. We have different people, different processes. We are a far sharper and better controlled organisation now. So I'd like to move the recommendations. Martin, did you want to propose this? I'm happy to second it for you, that we go with the recommendation that the let me just find this. Okay, so option 2, to release resale price restrictions affecting £800,000 homes. Is this the right bit I'm reading? Okay, 800, not £800,000, 8 times £100,000 homes in Fordham. Each restriction is to be released at the next point of sale of each dwelling, and purchasers shall immediately enter in replacement resale price agreements with the local housing authority, East Cambridgeshire District Council. And I thank East Cambridge and District Council for taking on these houses and hopefully securing them for their residents for the future. So if we could take a vote, please, on that. And abstentions. Thank you very much. Noted. Okay. Right. Thank you very much indeed. Right. Nick, thank you so much. Much appreciated. Right. Number 10, infrastructure delivery framework. I think this is over to you, Judith. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this is a update on the work on the infrastructure delivery framework, and really to set out for the committee how we're going to go forward from here, and to bring you up to date with all the work that has been going on. So just to remind the committee, the infrastructure delivery framework was commissioned in September, and Stantec were appointed to do that work. And they've been working very closely with all of the constituent authorities and indeed with other stakeholders such as UK Power Network, Anglian Water, Water Resources East, etc., to get not only an understanding of the local plans and the emerging local plans, but also the infrastructure plans of those providers. And obviously they're very much that's by way of example. It's a far longer list. Their work has focused on 4 themes: energy, water, transport and connectivity, including digital, and the blue-green infrastructure. And so what they've been identifying is where are on individual sites, both in terms of, the local plan sites and emerging sites, where do these 4 types of infrastructure have barriers to enabling that growth to come forward, and identifying that and scaling it up. So not only do we understand it at the local level, but we can see the aggregate scale of all of those barriers that there are, and actually think about what can we do about it. So it's providing an evidence base to drive action. That work has been overseen by a steering group of local authority, generally planning people who have worked alongside the Stantec and have had both individual meetings as well as collective meetings. So that's been going on. And then in addition, the place directors, so the senior officers within each authority, have also acted as a sponsor for that work to make sure we're kind of joining it up across the piece and more widely. So that we received a draft report just before, I can't remember the exact date, but just before the general election. And we received that report, and we asked Stantec to go away and do a couple of things. One was to make sure that all of the technical work was robustly checked and challenged, because one of the things that we saw there was that we had reports from, for instance, UK Power Network and others, and we just wanted to make sure that we'd really kind of check that back with our own understanding to make sure that we all recognise the information in the report before it came to committee. But the other significant thing that we have asked Stantec to do is to recognise that by the time we'd finished our workshop, we had a workshop on the day before the general election, and straight after that we recognised that obviously the landscape was changing and how we would be using this report was potentially changing. And indeed, obviously now it's quite clear that that report has a flow into the local growth plans, because clearly there will be a number of pieces of evidence flowing into that local growth plan. You'll obviously be aware of the shared ambition work, of the state of the region work, of all of the kind of performance monitoring reports that went to the board last week, etc. But we also need to put alongside it this Stantec piece of work. And so we wanted to make sure that the narrative was written in a way that actually fitted the circumstances of the 5th of July rather than the 28th of June. So Stantec colleagues have responded very positively to that challenge and understand that the key driver for CPCA and our constituent authorities is that we have a product that we can use and really make sure that it fits with how we want to use it going forward. So we have this week received the revised draft, which was on time with the conversations with Stantec. That report will be circulated to place directors, if it hasn't already, but certainly very shortly. And we have a place director session. All the place directors will be reviewing it with their teams, and we'll have a session on the 15th of August to review that. All of that information will then be flowing into the local growth plan development as well, because obviously all of those 4 areas of energy, water, connectivity and the blue-green infrastructure all need to flow into whatever we're saying in terms of the local growth plan. So those 2 things will be happening in parallel, in effect, the finalisation of the Stantec report as a draft report before it comes to committee, alongside the development of the local growth plan. So what I would intend to do is, depending on our plans for September, we will either be bringing the formal report to you in September, or we can have, if we're preferring to go down the route of having an informal workshop type session in September, we can of course present it in that format and have a discussion before perhaps formally considering it in October, and the report perhaps going alongside to the board alongside the sort of further development of the local growth plans. But very happy to take any questions either on process or content, and Adrian's been working very closely with me in terms of the work with Stantec as well as very regularly meeting with Stantec colleagues in the last couple of weeks.
Great, thank you very much indeed. Questions, Lara?
So tomorrow you have your meeting with the National Infrastructure Commissioner, and now you have a draft report from Stantec. What are the top 1 or 2 level infrastructure challenges that, based on this data, we can now share with Commissioner?
Good question.
Adrian, do you want to pick up the overview, and then I can just say a few words about the particular flow into the event tomorrow?
Yes, thank you. So it won't come as a surprise to the committee, given what you've been discussing previously, but energy and water have come up as 2 critical issues for our area in terms of not just managing future growth, but also in terms of delivering the current needs that we've got. So that has come out very strongly from the report. The other issues that Judith mentioned, the other themes around transport and connectivity, they're bringing up point issues, areas where there are obviously transport challenges, but those 2, water and energy, are almost universal in the sense that we have real challenges already in the Greater Cambridge area, which is leading to intervention by the Environment Agency. But looking at across our whole patch, we are a water stressed area, and they've been flagging up the challenges, even with the prospective reservoir coming in 2035. So at that level, water has come out. And then on the electricity side, the thing that we had to check was the message we were getting back from the utilities was very much, they have headroom at the moment and they will deliver what is needed. But that's because that's what they're required to do. When we get into picking apart future growth, then we don't have capacity there to utilize. And so it is the cumulative impact and trigger points. So that was coming out very strongly across the area. And it's not just the availability of power. And Judith mentioned more and more renewable schemes looking to put energy back into the system. It was also about consistency. So we heard from in the Fenland area of power fluctuations that were affecting business processes, for example. So it's those two come out very strongly.
Perhaps I could just add to that, Chair. So obviously what we're very keen to do, and in fact the person I've been liaising with is walking past now, what we've been very keen to do is make sure we land the key messages on electricity distribution and generation with the NIC tomorrow. So David Packer and I have been talking about the I think it's probably about 5 or 6 pages of the report that focus very much on those issues so that we can try and land some of those points in our remarks tomorrow. So the electricity section specifically goes through the different areas and looks at where there's what the grid supply points are, and then where there's headroom for growth, where there isn't headroom for growth, and where situation is already overloaded at the moment. It also looks at what UK Power Network have said that they have already got in train to do about that, and whether that's, for instance, new circuits, establishing new substations and those kind of things, and when they're scheduled to happen. Because obviously one of the difficulties we often have with growth is they're scheduled to happen, let's say 2028, they actually happen, several years after that. So one of the things we're keen to say is there's fairly short-term planning in terms of power distribution. And indeed, it's frequently the case, unfortunately, that those dates aren't met. So again, what we're hoping to do is to take key points from that report and make sure that those of us at the table weave that information into the discussion with NIC tomorrow. Hopefully that's helpful.
So if I may just come in. What you haven't mentioned is blue-green infrastructure. So it's all, from my point of view, it's a personal view, it's all very well unlocking the potential for growth by solving the energy and the water and the transport issues. But if that growth doesn't deliver places, high quality places where people want to live, then it's all for nothing. So we have a massive nature deficit in this area, with fewer trees than anywhere else in the UK, fewer, high quality managed green, open green spaces, a real lack of access to people to those blue and green spaces. And so, I really hope that when you have your meeting tomorrow, you don't let the blue and green infrastructure just be the subtext, which is, you and I've already had a conversation about this. I get terribly frustrated that in bullet points, environment or that sort of thing is always the last bullet point, whereas my own personal view is it needs to be the first one. So, if we are not dealing with the nature deficit here, and by, we've adopted a doubling nature policy. We double nature in our area. We only bring it up to national average, no better than that. So, please, can we just be mindful that we have to create places where people want to live. And we know that during the pandemic, the people who did best during the pandemic were the people who had access to the countryside, and actually their health and well-being is better to start with, and so forth. So it's all very well focusing on, the kind of hard stuff, the energy, water, the transport, but the blue-green infrastructure is what really matters to people. Actually, I would say. I don't know if yes, Councillor Goodall.
Thank you, Chair. My question is on transport. As you know, the Chancellor Exchequer on the 29th said some infrastructure projects will be cancelled because of budgeting. Do we know of any of the projects in our area which are going to be cancelled? My main concern is Ely North Junction and the dualling of the Solham single line, which then gets more freight trains through from Felixstowe, and also the A10 and A14 improvements. Are they going to be at risk?
Yeah, right, Judith, over to you.
Yes.
Have a conversation.
Yes, I spoke to DFT. Thank you. I spoke to DFT yesterday, and that's part of very much an ongoing liaison. And I know the mayor has some conversations scheduled with the Secretary of State where he will also, I'm sure, much more effectively than I tried yesterday to gain clarity over these issues. So it's absolutely clear that no decisions have been made at the moment. I directly asked about the schemes at Ely Junction. There clearly are challenges in terms of the budget position, but there is no decision to cancel that scheme. That was clear, and that there's clearly a review. There's a very clear focus, I was told by that senior civil servant, on rail and buses, and therefore, to quote, I should not be pessimistic about that, was the feedback. In terms of the roads, they haven't had a steer on roads yet. Clearly, a lot of new ministers are taking up their responsibilities, and there will be discussions clearly about the major road network and what that might mean. But there's no indication to me about down tools that's stopping. There was absolutely no remarks of that kind, but very a clear, considered look at the priorities that have been set out by the DFT, those 5 priorities, and a very clear stress to me that there was a focus on rail, on buses, and on green infrastructure and sustainable and active travel, and looking at how that sort of brings around the wider objectives, but no clear indications on schemes, no.
So if I could just interject before I come to you, Nicola. So, we have a whole load of brand new MPs in this area. I would suggest that the mayor should be, getting together with those MPs of all colours to, hunt as a pack, basically, at Westminster, to make sure that, critical schemes like Ely Junction improvements go ahead. I think there's nothing like a load of MPs and a mayor lobbying as one body with a single voice to actually deliver benefits to us. So I think we would ask that you would do that, please. Nicola, I'll come back to you.
Going to say, from my perspective, obviously I welcome the report, the work done in terms of looking at the energy, water and electricity infrastructure, but something that I personally really believe in is that we need to start looking at degrowth and post-growth theories. So I'm glad that it mentions sustainable growth, because what we do have to realise is, in terms of managing future growth, and I know we have to grow to some extent, but to decarbonise and to increase nature, we have to consider sharing resources fairly and using less of them. And that often, at some point, will mean degrowth and post-growth. And it's not a very, welcomed idea when people talk about that. But that is actually what lots of scientists and environmentalists and environmental philosophers are saying. Those are things that we have to look at. And I know that's difficult to accept, but that is the truth.
Thank you very much, Mayor.
It's just to speak to your request, Chair. For the record, all successful MPs have been written to, and bit by bit I'm meeting them and I'm enjoying those conversations. I have to say they slightly have a different flavour nowadays, and I'm looking forward to that. The point you make about working together, I know Chief Exec is also kind of often in those meetings with me, and that's across all parties, just for reassurance. And the idea that hopefully the combined authority, represented by myself and Rob, either going down to Westminster or trying to pull people together here on times when very busy MPs are up here, is certainly something I'm hoping to work towards. It is within the DNA of the combined authority to make work collaboratively with all our new MPs.
Thank you very much. If there's no more questions, we're just asked to note this report. I think we've done that. We've been going for nearly 2 hours. Do people want a 5-minute comfort break, or are you happy to go? We would. So if we just take a 5-minute comfort break, please. Thank you. Jolly good. Righty-ho, everyone. On to item 11, which is the climate programme. And I'm just going to hand over to Adrian just to introduce this, and then we'll have a discussion about it.
Thank you, Chair. So in front of you, the report covers 5 recommendations. So I'll just very briefly summarise what we're intending with this report. So the first one is to approve the strategic direction of the climate programme. So under our new assurance framework, the decisions on individual projects go through investment panel, investment committee and board, depending on their level of expenditure, total cost. And thematic committees such as this provide a steer to that process. So the first bit of the report is going through the allocation of money that the board made, the climate programme, and how that could be deployed. The second recommendation is, following on the discussions that we previously had at the committee, the proposal is to have a bidding round where partners can come forward with projects that comply with the principles that you've previously set and deliver against the climate action plan and priorities. And then 2 bits of dealing with funding. So the first one, which we've already touched on, is the Net Zero Villages programme was going to be deployed via combined authority on a authority-wide basis. The proposal is to allocate to individual councils to take that forward, and the proposal in here is the amount within that allocation. So to get approval for subdividing it amongst the authorities. The fourth recommendation is to take the remaining capital funding from the care homes retrofit programme and to request that the board redeploy that back into the climate programme. So it was an original board decision. It was a £2 million project, of which the majority is unspent because of, as we've reported previously, challenges in the sector and delivery. So that's a request to essentially say that can be put towards the climate programme future activity. And then finally, we have taken through a business case around resources for undertaking the climate action plan review. So the plan runs until March, and previously we've brought for you proposals that we need to take that forward for another period. And within that includes work on assessing climate risk, adaptation measures that will be needed, and also the work on locally determined contributions. I'm happy to stop there. There are an update I'd like to give on the table 1, which is about how we're taking things through the committees, but I can do that.
Okay, should we just see what questions are coming from your introduction, then we'll come back to you. Questions? Laura?
So on table 1, you summarize the projects that we have already identified, and so then that leaves a remainder that's available for bidding. I'm concerned that we're focusing on soliciting bids for the current year, and if in publicizing this opportunity, if we were to say the current year and next year, I feel like we'll get a much better range of things. And given what date it is now, and having bids for things that can finish by March, I think is going to be different.
Okay, do you want to comment on that?
Yes. Absolutely. We agree, and we are working on the basis of allowing flexibility into 25-26. I think it is what we need to do is to focus on ensuring that the bidding round that we go live with is focused on delivering the clear strategic framework that you have set and was within the climate change action plan. And as we sort of commented earlier, I think it's really, really important that we focus on having the right outputs and outcomes and impact, and not whether it finished delivery on the 31st of March or actually whether it finished delivery on the 30th of June. What we're really keen to do is to make sure we have the right projects and have the right communication strategy and engagement strategy to allow the best projects to come forward with their best business cases for investment, and that they're then properly assessed and funded in the right way. There may be some that have the opportunity for quick spend, and we will encourage those. However, that will not be at the exclusion of projects that are looking to spend in 25-26. And I think it makes most sense to see this opportunity as a bidding round that extends into the new financial year.
Thank you. Nicola?
On renewable generation. It is now. On the renewable generation, where there's a 250k grant opportunity to allow public sector organisations and community groups to apply for funding to install solar panels, how will the combined authority ensure that all community groups know about the opportunity to bid for funding? Just wondered whether that will be kind of advertised or whether that will come through our local authorities, that we would need to do some of that work around that. Just get a question around that. Thanks.
Very good question, and one of the things we need. Very good question, and one of the things we are focused on is producing a very clear communication strategy that sits alongside the implementation plan for all of these funds. One of the things I'm very keen to do is to make sure that we have the right capacity in the right places to run these at the right times. And Adrian and the team and I are going through that in a lot of detail at the moment. And one of the things I'm keen to make sure is the kind of scheduling of this, because what I don't want to see is kind of confused communications just because of the volume of it that is happening. So I think you make a good point about what are the right channels. Because that, you know, if we've got different channels for different messages, that could work. However, if we've got one channel and lots of things are going out all at the same time, I think that could be quite confusing. So we're very much reviewing that communication strategy to think how that can work. And as you suggest, different channels might be best for different ways. We can also, I think, explore the value of how we consider delegating some of those, you know, working with our constituent authorities to look at the best channels to do that. So we'll work very closely with our constituent authorities on that.
Thank you. I'm pleased to hear that. And obviously, we have a big sort of list of stakeholder groups, don't we? So a number of whom invited came ask questions earlier this morning. So good, but yeah, do use us, Martin.
Thanks again, Chair. In 3.1, the 9 million capital and the 2 million revenue appears to have now been badged as an opportunity fund. Is this correct?
No. Do you want to answer that? We're not very good at this, are we?
You might need to. Oh no, they do go together.
No, that's the total budget allocation, and obviously from that we have a number of business cases that are going through or gone through. So the opportunity fund obviously would be less than that, and it sets out later in the report what we've got available in that opportunity fund. So it shouldn't. The 9 million is the total new allocation that the board made in the MTFP.
Is that clear to you? Or?
That's fine. Another thing is there seems to be missing from the report is there was £50,000 promised to East Cambridge District Councils for its habitat management plans over the 24-25. It appears to have disappeared off the table. Is that the case?
So the proposal, and that was originally floated when the board made the allocation, was about biodiversity support. And in conversations with East Cambs officers, that was really aimed at undertaking biodiversity surveys of their assets and then developing action plans. And because of the timing of our reports going through, it missed this year's season for undertaking those surveys. So we have it as a potential for next year's funding, and we will be bringing that forward as a proposal. We need to work through the concept around that, because we've looked at how it can support all authorities and align with the local nature recovery strategy work. But by bringing that forward, there's time for authorities to put plans in place to bring forward those surveys. So it's not lost, but you're right, it's not shown as part of the current round of projects being funded.
So we don't have to rebid, it's still there.
No need to rebid. Obviously, we'll look at where people have expressed things already, we look at the bidding round and how we pick that up to be fair to everyone.
Thanks. I should just add a clarity on that. So you will see from the table that there's a kind of two-stage approval process for individual projects. So what we're looking at here is the kind of strategic fit. You know, are we content with these things broadly going forward? Those projects are then tested through the concept paper stage and the business case stage. So what will happen in terms of that biodiversity planning proposal, what we would look to do if we work on the basis of, say, and obviously I'm speaking speculatively at the moment, but if we worked on the basis of, say, 50k per authority, which is obviously the scale you spoke about, and therefore potentially 350,000 if it was totaled up across all authorities in the same year, and that was revenue funding, then we would need to put forward firstly that as a proposal through this programme for strategic fit here, and then it would go through the detailed concept and business case proposal in order to be able to make that decision that would be funded. And as Adrian quite rightly said, we'd be looking for that to come through the programme. So that's the process it would go on. Clearly what we need to do, there's kind of two strands of programme development I think we're focused on at the moment. And yes, you know, this is a work in progress, and you know, there will be learning to do along the way. But in effect, we're moving ahead with trying to ensure the delivery for 24-25, but we also need to be focused, and this is where your point is very helpful and relevant, and indeed Councillor Davenport Ray's is about planning for 25-26, because what I want to be in a position is that the delivery for 25-26 is in place much earlier in the financial year than we're currently in, and that's clearly got to be the goal. We are on a learning process, but that I just wanted to sort of set out firstly that overview of looking at this year and next year, and also what the process is, so that all members are clear on that.
Just one more thing on the net zero villages. The financial split proposed, one is it capital or revenue funding? And what are the wide rules and expectations in the terms of what the money can be spent on? And are there the terms and conditions been set up yet?
Thank you.
So the money's capital funds, isn't it? For just double checking. There's a lot of numbers, isn't there, to look at? So yes, it's capital funding. In terms of the processes, there will be a grant funding agreement with each. So before that happens, obviously, because this was a board decision, the decision will need to go to board on the 4th of September. So if and when the board then approve that, in parallel, Adrian will be working with Rena's team to prepare grant funding agreements based around the amounts, so that we can issue those grant funding agreements. Now, those grant funding agreements will contain the terms and conditions of the funding, and it will be the typical terms and conditions that we have. The proposal, though, that we've talked about with place directors and more widely, is that we would look to issue 50% of the money up front, and then 50% of the money at the end of the financial year, subject to progress, with, you know, that the local authority is content with its own progress against the objective set. So as long as that progress is going ahead and we've got a clear sighting on that, then we'll be able to release the second half of the money. I think that then puts you in a position of knowing that the funds are there, knowing how you're working on it. You've got agreed milestones without unnecessary kind of bureaucracy about monthly claims and all that kind of thing. But it continues to give us the oversight of the monitoring. One of the things we need to do, and it partly picked up in some remarks that were made earlier on in the meeting as well, is just to make sure that we work collaboratively together, so that if there are opportunities to work cross-border, or if there are opportunities to work together in order to reduce administration costs or share best practice, that I anticipate that will be part of the grant funding agreement as well. I'm sure that's what everybody would want to do, but it's always helpful to state it in the funding agreement. So that's the kind of approach that we'll be taking. It will be flexible, appropriate and proportionate. That's certainly my aim.
Can I just clarify then? So the paying it out in 2 tranches, will we? So if a council manages get the money, has lots of fundable projects. I mean, they might well have stuff ready to go, and actually they need the money earlier than the end of the year. Are we expecting them to fund that, or will we review whether we can bring that second payment forward? And if we have a council who actually really isn't getting the money out of the door, is the plan still to give them the second half if they actually haven't managed to get any of that first 50% payment out the door?
So there's
allocated.
There's 2 questions there. So
Yeah.
certainly in terms of if anybody was struggling, we'd certainly be looking at working with them to support them and perhaps getting the support of another local authority who could assist them in that. I hope we wouldn't be in a position, clearly it could happen, but I hope we wouldn't be in a position that any local authority wouldn't be able to kind of resolve any issues in order to be able to spend that money. But clearly there will be, if we would be able to kind of hold that money back and only pay it when things were back on track, for example, we can absolutely look flexibly. I think the views that I had was that if we paid 50% up front and then commitments were made, if we need to pay earlier, but I think the view of officers that I've spoken to is probably the amounts are sufficiently small that local authorities would be able to handle the cash flow, because it isn't large amounts of money. But if there are going to be any issues around that, then obviously very happy to talk about it.
That's lovely. We just need to be making sure we're efficient about paying. Lara.
In 5.1, you talk about reforming the independent commission. Where in the financials have we reserved the funds in order to support that reforming?
If I can just talk about the reforming the commission. So the reforming, I'm not quite sure reforming is perhaps the right word, but engaging perhaps. So I had a very helpful conversation with a number of members of people and work with the mayor on that, to sort of speak to people who were part of the commission. And there's a number of people who've come back as a result of that are keen to firstly see the impact of the work to date, and secondly be part of a process of review and drive up to 2030. So that work will form part of what's basically contained in the 5th and final recommendation as part of the Climate Change Action Plan review. So the work about working with the Commission will be included in the wider work about the Climate Change Action Plan review. Do you want to add anything to that, Adrian, to bring that a little bit more to life?
So obviously there's a big piece of work to take the review forward, and there will be evidence-based activity, and we were looking to work with the Commission so that if they've got things that they want particularly us to review, that's part of that evidence base. So that's why we've kept it within that climate review part. Obviously, if there are specific additional activities, then that's something we might consider through the future revenue spend we've got. But at the moment, it's within that climate review pot.
Thank you. Yes, Nicola.
Thank you. And I'm really aware with this. These are all really new projects and new ideas. So I do understand the difficulty, and there has always been difficulty in the past with climate funding projects, but I think we're just looking at the future, aren't we? And that's why there's some difficulties. I've got a question around the allocation of an opportunity fund via a bidding round. I've got a couple of questions. So can the combined authority be any more specific about the type of project you're looking to fund beyond the alignment to the committee's criteria and climate action plan actions? And can the combined authority assure constituent councils that funding will be committed proportionally across the constituent councils, or will it just be this kind of bidding pot and those that bid for the most get it? Just wondered how that might work. Thank you.
Good questions.
Very good question. So, in terms of the types, so there's almost two elements, isn't there? The types of projects and the geographical spread. And perhaps I'll say a few words and then hand over to Adrian. So in terms of the types of projects, I think that there's a number of things we need to nail down, and they will be nailed down very shortly, because for the bidding round, although it isn't brought out as a line on that table for the committee, but we need to produce a concept form and a business case for the bidding round to go to committee. So that is where that detailed work's currently underway in order that can go to both panel and committee. So that's where those details and the types of things that will need to be included, for example, are who is eligible, what activity is eligible, and in particular I think there's kind of three kind of strands that we need to be focused on. So one is the strategic fit with the climate change action plan. Is the proposed project directly delivering an element of that climate change action plan? The second bit is, so what's the impact, what are the outputs, what are the outcomes, effectively what are we buying for the grant money? And then the third issue is deliverability. Can they and if they can, when can they deliver? So those are the kind of three fundamental questions. And so in effect, once the process that we set up in the bidding round will be to test each project against those criteria, the strategic fit, the impact and the deliverability. And in effect, what we will have, and the team and I have been talking about this, we'll need a kind of an assessment framework so that people could be simply but straightforwardly scored. So for instance, you could be scored systems that I've used before, you can be scored 1 to 5 on your strategic fit, 1 to 5 on impact, 1 to 5 on deliverability, and you have to get a minimum 3 in order to be considered, and then the top scoring ones are funded. But what we need to be is really open about what good looks like. So when you're filling in a form, you're not thinking, well, I've got no idea what I'm supposed to put here, but you've actually got some idea what you're aiming for, because if you've got what to put in, then you can decide whether your project meets that criteria or not. Now, it might be that we will, if you're saying you're going to spend this financial year, clearly we will expect the deliverability to be more robust than if they're saying they're going to spend next summer. So there'll be some sort of nuances around that, but that's the kind of approach that we would be looking at. Now, in terms of the geography question, I don't suggest that we very hard and fast allocate a pot of money for each area, because it's then going to be very difficult to kind of know exactly but we can broadly have percentages based maybe on population that we then monitor and deliver that information back to you. Because what we can do is then say to you, okay, well, this is the spread of applications. Now we could take that approach and then say, well, it doesn't seem that we've had many projects from this location, or we haven't had the other option that could happen is we have had lots of projects that deliver this particular part of the climate change action plan, but none that deliver that. So I think we need to look at the geography and the fit with the climate change action plan and keep that under review. And then with yourselves, I would suggest we might want to target our communications, target work with that. If let's say it's one particular local authority that doesn't have many applications, then we could work more closely with that local authority to do that. So I think that's the kind of approach I would take and have previously used. So I hope that's helpful in terms of thinking it through.
Thank you very much. And it'd be nice to think that some projects which are cross-border projects, and then we'd give some weighting to, collaboration and wider benefit and innovation as well. Lara.
I'm a bit concerned about the timing on this. We're in August tomorrow. And it sounds like we have some really important governance reasons and things we need to think through still. But when are we anticipating being able to provide potential bidders with information about how to bid and start getting applications in?
I think realistically it's going to be later in October.
That gives. So that's when we would advertise it, and then we have to bring them back and analyze them. So are we thinking that we're not actually going to be able to approve anything until the end of the financial year?
So I think part of, so I mean, I've got quite a lot of experience of chairing committees that gave out European development, rural development funding. One way of doing this is to take expressions of interest and do an initial filter on expressions of interest, because, full applications can take a huge amount of time and resource and effort for people to do. So, that might be one way that we could look at that, take initial expressions of interest, filter out, the kind of no-hopers, and then think about the time frame to allow people to really work projects up to the point at which they are fundable.
I think Adrian was
so we have been also discussing as part of that having a sort of meet the buyers event, but essentially a stakeholder event where actually people can talk about their projects, particularly because the committee have said you're very keen to see collaborative strategic projects, and the danger with a bidding round that people don't have the time to find collaborative partners or just come in with their own projects. So I think we'd be looking very much to try and match projects. So I think we need to sort of make sure our communications are clear about how we're going to do that early bit, but we do see it as being a much more sort of interactive process rather than trying to define everything and then just saying just bid.
Yes, no.
Yeah. Perhaps to add to that, thank you. It's not very responsive, is it? Just to add to that, because I think that's a really helpful way forward, and it's certainly something that I've seen work effectively in terms of you launch the bidding round and then you have a series of events which give people the opportunity to find out more about how they bid. It improves the quality of the bid. They get the opportunity to explore whether the bid fits, how they fill in an application form, what the key things are to look out for, what the assessment process is, understand the timetable, and ask their questions, whatever they might be. And I think that can be a really helpful part of the process. But what it does do is it takes more time than if you didn't do it. But I very firmly believe it does improve the quality and it does improve the engagement that we're going to have with lots of key stakeholders. So I think that approach is really, really important part of the process. I would suggest that particularly because we haven't got a history in terms of running this and people aren't used to this process. So I think that's quite different when people aren't used to it. So I think we need to probably give ourselves more time for the bidding round to be open, because it probably take people time to actually engage with it in the first place. So then when they submit when they do submit an application, then we're going to need a very clear appraisal stage where we need to think about how they're going to be scored, and I believe we're going to need to get that funded externally so that we have people on hand that are available to do that scoring. I also think, and I believe it's going to be quite an important part of the process, is then to have a moderation of that by our constituent authorities. So, for instance, if there's Peterborough projects, Huntingdonshire projects, your officers are aware, they're aware of the geographical spread, they're aware of the strategic fit. We do that exercise and then that's reported back through the investment panel and committee process. So I don't think you're wrong in terms of when the approvals will happen and the grant funding agreements will go out.
So look, I'm concerned about our capacity to do this. Bearing in mind that when I chaired one of these local action groups, we had a staff of 6 managing a single grant programme, albeit it was a programme for some millions of pounds a year. Have we looked at using someone like Cambridgeshire Acre or Cambridge Community Foundation to manage it for us, which is what a lot of other people do?
Yes, and in fact, we were talking about that yesterday, and I think I think there's a couple of things. Firstly, there's different routes for different bits of the funding, because we also talked about the renewables. We could run that through another body. We could contract other organisations to deliver, and I've certainly done that in previous roles that we do that. I am also looking at bringing in more resources. So we've already brought in a project manager to join Adrian in the team as a temporary piece of extra resource. We have other people within the team who have capacity to support, and we're also looking at bringing in further support, which I'm talking with Rob Bridge and HR, in order to make sure that we have the capacity, both in an interim and a permanent basis, to support our work on climate and sustainability, and for next year going into the local nature recovery strategy as well. So we're very aware of those issues, and I think it's really important that we continue to talk about them.
Yeah. So I think it might be good if, Lara and myself have some sort of intermediate conversations with you about it, because I think we've both got some, professional experience in these fields, and so we might be able to actually help. Lara, thank you.
I apologize if I'm being overly pessimistic, but I mean, the objective of this was to try to get as much of the money into our regions as possible, as quickly as possible. And I think there's a likelihood at this point that we will get to the end of the financial year and have lots of capital and revenue that we once again have not spent. So the speed is really important on this particular project.
Yeah. And there are other ways, you can split it up and do a small grants program and a bigger grants program. The small grants program is far less demanding, and you get that moving quickly, and then you can devote more time to large grants programs. There's lots of, okay, so we're happy to help. And if anybody else has expertise in this area, please offer. Mike.
Yes, just to say, there's a bit of experience from Cambridge City Council, because in table 1, there's a reference to domestic retrofit, including retrofitting low-income homes. And actually, in my own ward in Arbury, we have about 150 homes plus now, I think, that have been retrofitted, low-income households. One of the issues around this was our capacity in our team to get the leverage in the funding, Homes Upgrade Grant and other funding available, but to have the officer capacity to make sure all those funding opportunities were being explored. And that's clearly an issue for the Combined Authority in terms of the wider strategy here. And that's going to be quite critical. And I think on some of the other issues we've touched on today, in terms of Combined Authorities being front and centre of a lot of delivery of all sorts of projects, then I think that officer capacity is clearly going to affect us in many areas of Combined Authorities work.
It is, because it's, we're not a big organisation is the bottom of the line, and people wear many hats here. Lorna, thank you for that.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I was going to say something about that whole issue about capacity, and that's been well aired, and I would share what's been said about the importance of getting this thing moving and getting it moving quickly, and seeking support from and leaning on as many people as we can with expertise in this area and with capacity in this area to support the effort to get this moving at pace. I'd also just like to say that the proposed themes are very much the right ones. I think if there is something that is still to be more advanced, it's that really important issue for many parts of the Combined Authority area of land use and land use change and agriculture, which I know is difficult and still being lots still to be understood, not just locally but nationally and even internationally. But it's something I would hope we would be mindful of and seeking to include as things develop. And just a final point about further iterations of the climate action plan and how really important it is that the work continues that we and others are doing to align our climate goals, align the evidence, align our ambitions, so that we are moving as one and understand what the aim is, how fast we can move, where we need to prioritize, and what our goal is. And that is extremely important in terms of achieving that area-wide carbon budget, not least to set that process in train.
Thank you very much. Yes, and then you wanted to come on to another thing as well, so we'll kind of hand over to you here to.
Just to come back, just on that point about the land use and agriculture. Obviously, it's a key theme of the climate action plan, and also it's a major source of emissions as well. disproportionately to other combined authorities in effect because of the nature of our geography. So we're very conscious of that, and we'll be looking to encourage proposals to come forward under that topic.
Right. Shall I hand back to you to finish off the presentation on this paper?
Yes, thank you. So just for clarity, we've touched on we're in a new system and some of the challenges around that. So in table 1, when we produced the plan, I included the projects and when they were likely to be going to investment panel and investment. We've got some changes to that where we just need to do some more work on the concept papers. So the 3 that we had going to the end of this month, which we're now looking to reschedule, would be the Peterborough Local Area Energy Plan work, the renewable generation and the HVO. So all of those are things that we just need to do a bit more work on the concept papers and our capacity to take all the things we've been taking through to the investment panel. So we'll just for clarity, those aren't currently, well, they're not going to the end of August, but we're looking to bring them forward as soon as we can resolve those. And then, did you want me to talk about any of the other recommendations?
Do you think you need to give us more information about any of them?
No, I'm quite happy that if you go through them, that the net zero villages, we've proposed an allocation by authority, so we need to read that. And then the care homes one was straightforward. It's something you've asked us to do.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Okay, let's yes. Oh, I'm sorry, Nicola.
Question. I just wondered about the pipeline projects. What is the time scale for that? Is there any thoughts around that? And then that's my final question. Thank you. Sorry about that.
Right, don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the bits of funding that we've put there is for supporting the development of business cases. So to bring forward a pipeline for future years, and I think we'd be looking to work out how that fits with the bidding round. Because it is, as people come forward with ideas, we may be able to then allocate some support for them to take it forward in future years.
Judith?
And if we're sort of considering the model that whereby we procure some additional help to run the bidding round, so for instance, it's contracted to a third party, we could indeed contract for them to do the development work or support others to but do that development work in parallel with the work that they're doing to develop the pipeline, so we could see the whole thing as a whole, and I think in that way it's that kind of approach of seeing how we can do things together to achieve the aims that you're setting out that is the type of approach we need to think of. So I'll certainly consider that as we work on this towards the end of this week.
Right. Well, I failed with a 12:30 end. Hey ho. But thank you for all of that. Okay. Recommendations. Recommendation E is just for noting. So I think we've noted that. I'm just going to assume you're happy for me to take A, B, C, and D together as one vote. I'm happy to propose them. Lara, do you want to second them? Does everybody agree with the recommendations, please? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Right, moving on. Maxine, you've been really patient. I'm sorry we've kept you waiting for so long. So item 12, the Greater South East Net Zero Hub update. Sorry you always get put at the end, because actually it's always really interesting what you have to say. So it's not that we don't think it's important. And it was. There you go. You're on.
Thank you. So this paper outlines the decisions that have been made since December 2023. In March, we updated the Hub Board delegations from the Director of Resources and Performance to the Director of Place and Connectivity to make decisions on behalf of the combined authority when sitting on the Net Zero Hub boards. The paper's in 2 parts. The first part outlines the decisions that have been made, so it's sort of the decision record from the Hub Board, and the second part, as requested, is just an update on the Community Energy Fund. So just to take a very high level overview in terms of the types of decisions that have been made, some have been made around what we call our strategic project pipeline. So this is support we give give to authorities for sort of technical work, but also sort of research-based studies. So we have changed the scope of a few projects. We've extended some, and we've changed the scope on the what we call the able to pay for domestic retrofit. We've added a new project, which is waste heap mapping tool, so a GIS-based tool for looking at waste heat across the whole of the Greater South East region. And we're currently sort of developing a scope with a working group around carbon removals and offsetting, and really looking to see where do we as a hub fit in that alongside other people sort of within that place. We've been doing a lot around hub governance transition. So over this period, we have set up 3 regional advisory boards. London is also in the process of setting one up. We've appointed the chairs and we've appointed the initial membership. We're doing inductions for those RABs in September. So that's all moving to plan. The Community Energy Fund, it's a 10 million fund in England. We were allocated sort of initially sort of 2 million over 2 years per hub. We were able to oversubscribe on our first round of funding, so we were awarded an additional 400k for this financial year, which we have also fully committed. So we're looking for an opportunity in September to be able to bid to the department for about 400k available funding plus any underspends from other areas. We've found that we've had a really good uptake on that grant. And we've also had approval to develop a net zero investment service. So that's looking at a sort of technical consultancy grant that's linked to getting private sector investment into projects. One of our key objectives is to leverage in private sector investment into net zero projects. We're all aware that the public finances aren't able to fully fund all of these projects. So we need to really work with our sort of local authorities to upskill everybody in terms of how do we structure those deals, what does good look like, what are good heads of terms. Now, as you'll be aware, we're also managing the local net zero accelerator with Greater Manchester, West Midlands, York and North Yorkshire. And we should be, by the end of today, launching our dynamic purchasing system financial support services. This will also be available to the combined authority. And what that's going to enable us to do is to be able to get those specialist services to really support authorities to be able to structure those deals and look at the best way of developing those investment cases. So what we'll be doing, hopefully launching a fund in October that will support our authorities to be able to do that as well. And finally, we had some additional funding that we asked to be put into additional capacity support for our public sector decarbonisation pipeline. We're expecting a round in autumn, so we've had the agreement to procure local partnerships to provide us some additional capacity so we can get as many as we possibly can, bid ready and successful in the autumn funding round. We're also looking to fund an NHS heat network support. So we did some mapping in the east of England. The next phase is going into developing those into project proposals and replicating the initial study in the south so we can, start to do that. That's really looking at the NHS estate anchors for, heat networks and so on. That brings me to the end of the types of decisions we've made. So if there's any questions on that, or I can move on to a more detailed update of the community energy.
Thank you. I think it's very impressive. I mean, you are absolutely motoring, aren't you? It's really, really good. Any questions? Well, we'll Maxine crack on with the next bit. Thank you, and well done to all of you.
Thank you. Lots going on, and the team is growing. So fortunately, we're not doing this with just 7 people anymore. So as I mentioned, the Community Energy Fund is a 10 million fund. In our it funds community feasibility and development studies. So feasibility studies to 40,000, development studies to 100,000, and it's really about developing community-owned assets. As long as it's 50% community owned, there can be a blend of public or private investment in there. So it's renewable energy. These ones are sort of slightly broader. So we'll also look at things like EV charging points. And we also have projects lined up subject to more funding being made available. If we can draw down more funding, we will be able to do another funding round. But as it stands at the moment, we are fully committed. But very happy to take any questions on the Community Energy Fund. I just think in light of sort of recent policy announcements, you've heard of the GB Energy has been announced. It was in the King's Speech. That's very much, some of that is aligned with community and public sector projects. So we're expecting around 600 million in capital grants for public sector and up to 400 million for low cost loans for community sector. So that's filling that gap where the capital is needed. So we are confident that the demand, we've demonstrated the demand for the Community Energy Fund for development feasibility studies and to make the case for additional funds to be able to, made in future years so we can build that pipeline.
Thank you very much. Lara.
Thank you, Maxine. I always forget what a big geographic area you look after. You just happen to be based here, but you're looking after so much of the country. When I look at the second half of your report and the list of successful projects, I noticed that only one is from Cambridgeshire. What could the combined authority be doing better to encourage these work, or indeed our local authorities be doing better to get more Cambridgeshire projects in there?
Yes, yeah, like I say, we only had one approved in the Cambridgeshire Peterborough area. We also had one that applied, was approved, and the parish council withdrew support. So I think there's some work, and we've had worked with local authorities that have done this in other places, which is working with community groups to really help them get their governance right, get their membership right, so they're on a solid footing to be able to bid into these funds. We do have resource that can help them in terms of looking at what the opportunities are before they put a bid in. We can do some initial technical discussions with them. There's an awful lot that we can do with our team to support those projects at the initial stages. So I think it's really just sort of getting the message out that we are here and we are available to help, and don't be shy to knock on the door. We've used our existing networks, we've reached out, but unfortunately only sort of 2 came forward and were successful in the area. Okay.
Thank you. Branches the parish, 4 branches the parish council. More than 100,000. That's impressive. I have talked about their community and energy projects. So where's the stage 1, stage 2? So the money's being allocated. And what is the stage 1, stage 2 occur to?
Yes, so stage 1 is feasibility studies, so that fund can be up to 40,000. Stage 2 is the development funding up to 100,000. So that should be taking those projects up to investment readiness. So crowdfunding, they should be ready to get capital investment by the end of that study.
So the 40,000.
Yes.
Yeah. Any other questions? I guess, Laura.
Perhaps like that scheme for future communities so that we see an example of sharing.
Yes, I'm sure they'd be.
It just turns your mind on.
Let's invite them.
Okay, and that's an environment. What's a good point at which to invite them? Something.
Yeah, absolutely. We did fund a in the rural community energy fund for this one, a project in Westmill for a hydro. So I think they could potentially sort of come and talk as well. Yeah.
You have always simply on to work program. I'm assuming that's the issues for the work program. All happy? Good. Well, first of all, we'll note that, and then in next meeting, right? The meeting that was scheduled for the 11th of September, we're now going to have a workshop to discuss the local recovery strategy and the other thing that came up today, which I can't the report from the Stantec report. Okay, we're going to have a workshop. Yes. Yes.
Can I request one more thing for the agenda for the workshop? We talked a lot today about decisions we make. Some of them go to board, some of them go to the investment committee. Just some information for us about what happens to our decisions and maybe a flow chart of how that system works with the single assurance framework.
So the announcement committee, which will be meetings on September 1, with LJ Harrogate for Peach. Thank you everyone, thanks for attending. Thank you very much to all our colleagues for their hard work. And, enjoy the sunny day and the rest of all of this.